Pride. Before the fall. The cerulean sky resort stood like a gleaming jewel against Tokyo's skyline, its glass facade reflecting the setting sun in hues of amber and gold. Maxwell Reed straightened his custom Italian suit as he strode through the ornate lobby, his presence commanding attention without effort. At 45, the founder of Quantum Sphere Technologies had the confident posture of a man accustomed to moving markets with a single decision. "This is unacceptable," Maxwell said, his voice carrying across the marble expanse as he addressed the front desk clerk. "I specifically requested the Imperial Suite with the Mount Fuji view. How difficult is that to understand?" The young Japanese woman bowed slightly, her expression maintaining professional composure despite Maxwell's rising tone. "Very sorry, Mr. Reed. There seems to be miscommunication. The Imperial Suite is prepared now. Just a few more minutes, please." "Few more minutes?" Maxwell repeated, emphasizing her accent mockingly. "I've been waiting for 20 already. Does anyone here speak proper English? Get me your manager." Elena Reed watched this scene unfold from several paces behind her husband, her cheeks flushing with second-hand embarrassment. At 42, she possessed a quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with her husband's bombastic nature. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and her green eyes reflected a mixture of concern and resignation. "Max," she said softly, approaching and touching his arm. "It's fine. We can wait a few minutes?" Maxwell shook her hand off. "It's not fine, Elena. We pay premium rates for premium service. That should include basic communication skills." Hiro Tanaka, the resort's operations manager, appeared moments later. His immaculate suit and perfect posture projected an air of efficiency and respect. At 34, he had risen quickly through the ranks of international hospitality. "Mr. and Mrs. Reed, I deeply apologize for the inconvenience," he said, his English fluent but accented. "There was an issue with the climate control system in your suite that we wanted to resolve before your arrival." "It's been fixed now," Maxwell scoffed. "Well, at least someone here can communicate properly. Though I'm not convinced about the competence of your staff overall." Hiro maintained his professional smile despite the barb. "I assure you, Mr. Reed, our staff is highly trained. Many are multilingual, though English is not always their first language. When you're in the luxury business, excellence isn't optional," Maxwell said dismissively. "If I ran my company like this, I'd be finished." Elena stepped forward, extending her hand to Hiro. "Please forgive my husband. We've had a long flight and he gets impatient. I'm Elena. Pleasure to meet you. Mrs. Reed, we're honored to have you both staying with us." There was something in Hiro's eyes, a flicker of recognition perhaps, that Elena caught but chose to ignore. Their fingers brushed momentarily during the handshake, and she felt a slight tension in his grip, quickly released. "If you'll follow me, I'll personally escort you to your suite," Hiro offered. As they walked through the opulent corridors, Maxwell continued his litany of complaints about international standards and the importance of clear communication in business. Elena noticed how the staff they passed lowered their eyes when Maxwell approached, their bodies tensing slightly. The Imperial Suite was breathtaking. A panoramic view of Tokyo stretched before them, with Mount Fuji visible in the distance through floor-to-ceiling windows. Modern Japanese design elements blended seamlessly with Western luxury. "Will this be satisfactory, Mr. Reed?" Hiro asked. Maxwell surveyed the room with a critical eye. "It'll do, though I expect the rest of our stay to proceed without these amateur hiccups." After Hiro left, Elena moved to the windows, watching the city lights begin to illuminate as dusk settled. Maxwell loosened his tie and poured himself a drink from the bar. "Was that necessary, Max?" she asked quietly. "What?" "Embarrassing that poor girl at reception. Mocking her accent." Maxwell waved dismissively. "They're in the service industry, Elena. If they can't handle feedback, they're in the wrong business." Elena turned to face him. "There's feedback, and then there's cruelty." "Don't be dramatic," he said, taking a long sip of his whiskey. "This is why I'm successful. I don't accept mediocrity." Elena's phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at it, a small smile playing at her lips. "What's that?" Maxwell asked. "Nothing," she replied, tucking the phone away. "Just confirming a meeting tomorrow." "Meeting? We're supposed to be having dinner with the Nakamuras tomorrow. You are, Elena corrected him. I have other plans. Maxwell frowned. What could possibly be more important than meeting with our biggest potential Japanese investors? Elena watched him for a moment, contemplating how much to reveal. You'll find out soon enough, she said finally, her voice carrying a hint of something unfamiliar to Maxwell. Something that, had he been paying closer attention, might have warned him of the seismic shift about to occur in their carefully constructed world. The Hidden Queen. The following morning, Maxwell woke to find Elena's side of the bed empty. A note on her pillow simply read, Meeting. See you at lunch. Love, E. He crumpled the paper with a frown. This wasn't like her. Elena typically arranged her schedule around his, especially during important business trips. After a solitary breakfast, Maxwell met with his executive team in the resort's platinum-level conference room. As Chief Technology Officer Vivian Chen walked him through the upcoming presentation for the Nakamura Group, Maxwell found his attention drifting to the panoramic windows overlooking Tokyo Bay. Mr. Reed, should we continue? Vivian asked, noticing his distraction. Yes, of course, Maxwell said, straightening in his chair. But let's take a short break first. 20 minutes. As his team filtered out, Maxwell approached Hiro Tanaka, who had been overseeing the meeting arrangements. I need information about a meeting my wife is attending today, Maxwell demanded without preamble. Hiro's expression remained carefully neutral. I'm afraid I don't have that information, Mr. Reed. Don't be ridiculous. You're the operations manager. You know everything happening in this resort. Some of our guests prefer discretion, sir, Hiro replied evenly. Perhaps Mrs. Reed will share those details when she's ready. Maxwell's retort was interrupted by commotion in the hallway. Through the glass doors, he saw a delegation of Japanese executives being escorted to the grand conference room across the hall. At their center walked Elena, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, engaged in animated conversation with Keiko Nakamura, the CEO of Nakamura Group herself. What the hell? Maxwell muttered, striding toward the door. Hiro stepped subtly into his path. Mr. Reed, they're in the middle of negotiations. Perhaps. Maxwell brushed past him. My wife doesn't negotiate anything. She's an interior designer. He crossed the hallway and entered the grand conference room without knocking. 12 heads turned simultaneously to look at him, conversations halting mid-sentence. Elena sat at the head of the table, folders and documents spread before her. Her expression shifted from professional authority to controlled surprise. Maxwell, she said calmly, I wasn't expecting you. Keiko Nakamura, a formidable woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes, studied Maxwell with interest. So this is your husband, Elena-san? The one you mentioned. Maxwell looked between them, confusion evident on his face. What is this, Elena? Elena stood, smoothing her jacket. Keiko-san, would you excuse us for a moment? My husband and I need to have a brief conversation. Keiko nodded with understanding. Of course. We could all use a short break. Elena led Maxwell to a small adjoining room and closed the door behind them. The space felt suddenly too confined for the magnitude of what hung between them. Would you like to explain what you're doing in a meeting with the Nakamura Group? Maxwell asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The same group I've been trying to secure as investors for months? Elena met his gaze steadily. I was going to tell you today at lunch. I've accepted a position as Strategic Acquisition Advisor for Cerulean International Holdings. The parent company of this resort? Maxwell's disbelief was palpable. Since when? And what about our agreement that you would focus on managing our home life? I've been consulting for them for 8 months, Elena replied. And that agreement was your assumption, Max, not a mutual decision. I've been building my own connections while you've been focused on quantum sphere. Maxwell ran a hand through his hair in frustration. And you didn't think this information might be relevant to share with your husband? Would you have supported it? Elena asked pointedly. Or would you have dismissed it as a hobby like my interior design work? The truth of her words hit Maxwell like a physical blow. The Nakamuras aren't here to invest in quantum sphere, Elena continued softly. They're finalizing Cerulean's acquisition of 3 of their properties, including this one. I led the negotiations. Maxwell's face paled. You're telling me that the people I've been pursuing as investors are actually in business with my wife? Ironic, isn't it? Elena said. Especially considering your behavior yesterday. The incompetent staff you berated are now essentially under my purview. The door opened, and Hiro appeared with a respectful bow. Excuse the interruption, Mrs. Reed, but Nakamura-san is ready to proceed when you are. Reflections in glass, the suite that had seemed so spacious that morning now felt suffocating to Maxwell. He paced before the floor-to-ceiling windows, Tokyo sprawling before him in a maze of lights and shadow. His reflection stared back at him from the glass, a man suddenly uncertain of his place in the world. The door opened, and Elena entered, removing her earrings with a weary sigh. The negotiation had stretched into evening, leaving dinner plans abandoned. Productive day? Maxwell asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Elena set her briefcase down. Very. The acquisition is finalized. Cerulean will announce it publicly next week. She poured herself a glass of water and took a long sip. Your meeting went well? I canceled it, Maxwell admitted. Couldn't focus. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, filled with questions neither seemed ready to ask. Finally, Maxwell spoke. Why the secrecy, Elena? All these months? She settled onto the sofa, tucking one leg beneath her, a rare casual posture for someone usually so composed. Do you remember when I proposed joining the board of that tech education foundation last year? The one providing coding training for underprivileged women? Maxwell vaguely recalled dismissing the idea. What does that have to do with this? You told me it would be cute, but ultimately a distraction from supporting your career, Elena said, her voice even. You suggested I focus on planning our anniversary party instead. Maxwell winced at the memory. I didn't mean, yes, you did, Elena interrupted gently. Every time I've tried to pursue something meaningful professionally, you've minimized it. So when Keiko approached me after meeting at your company gala, impressed by my understanding of luxury markets, I decided to accept her mentorship without advertising it. Maxwell sat opposite her, leaning forward. I never intended to hold you back. Intentions don't matter as much as actions, Max, Elena replied. Do you know how it feels to watch your husband berate service staff for not speaking perfect English when you yourself speak 3 languages? To hear you call them incompetent when they work 16-hour days to create the luxury experience you take for granted? Maxwell had no answer for that. The silence stretched again, broken only by the distant hum of the city below. Do you remember how we met? Elena asked suddenly. A small smile touched Maxwell's lips despite himself. The Peninsula Hotel in Hong Kong, you were the assistant manager. And you were a startup founder attending your first major investment conference, Elena continued. You were so nervous you spilled coffee all over your presentation notes an hour before your pitch. You helped me reprint everything and found me a new shirt, Maxwell remembered. Then talked me through my pre-presentation panic. Elena nodded. I fell in love with that man, the one who was brilliant but humble, who looked at me with gratitude and saw me as his equal. She met his eyes directly. What happened to him, Max? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Maxwell turned back to the window, studying the city lights as if they might offer some explanation for how he'd transformed from that eager young entrepreneur into the man he'd become. Success changes people, he said finally. It reveals them, Elena countered. The question is whether you like what's been revealed. Maxwell's phone rang, his executive assistant calling. He silenced it without looking. I should have told you about the position, Elena acknowledged. But would you have truly heard me? Or would you have seen it as a charming diversion from my real job as Maxwell Reed's wife? Her words struck with precision, finding vulnerabilities Maxwell hadn't known existed. I don't know, he admitted, the rare concession feeling foreign on his tongue. Elena rose and moved to stand beside him at the window. Their reflections overlapped in the glass. 2 people who had shared a life but somehow grown into strangers. I love you, Max, she said softly. I always have. But I need to be seen for who I am, not just what I am to you. Maxwell turned to face her. And who are you, Elena? Beyond what I know, That's what I've been trying to discover, she answered. If you're interested, I'd like you to get to know that person. Maxwell hesitated, then nodded. I think I'd like that too. Elena touched his face gently, a familiar gesture now charged with new meaning. Then perhaps this trip isn't ruined after all. She glanced at her watch. It's late, but the hotel's garden terrace is still open. Would you like to have a drink with me? Just two people getting reacquainted. For the first time since their arrival, Maxwell felt something loosen in his chest. I'd like that very much. As they left the suite, Maxwell noticed how Elena exchanged genuine smiles with the staff they passed. Connections formed in a world that had existed alongside his. Unseen until now, Bridge of Understanding dawn broke over Tokyo, painting the sky in watercolor strokes of pink and gold. Maxwell stood on their suite's balcony, watching the city awaken. Last night's conversation with Elena had stretched until nearly 2 in the morning, the longest they'd talked without interruption in years. They had shared drinks beneath paper lanterns in the resort's secluded garden, rediscovering each other in ways that felt both familiar and entirely new. A soft touch on his shoulder drew him from his thoughts. Elena, wrapped in a silk robe, handed him a cup of coffee. You're up early, she observed, leaning against the railing beside him. Maxwell took a sip of the perfectly prepared coffee. She still remembered how he liked it. Thought I'd watch the sunrise. Clear my head before today's meeting with the Nakamuras. Elena studied his profile. Nervous? Terrified, he admitted with a short laugh. First time in years I've gone into a meeting feeling completely outmatched. They respect preparation and authenticity, Elena offered. Not just power plays, Maxwell nodded considering her words. I've been thinking about what you said last night. About the man I was when we met versus who I've become. He turned to face her. I'd like to try something today if you'll help me. 2 hours later, Maxwell stood in the hotel's language center with Yukiko, a patient tutor in her 60s. Elena watched from the doorway as Maxwell clumsily practiced basic Japanese greetings and phrases of gratitude. Arigato gozaimasu, Maxwell repeated after Yukiko, his American accent heavy but his effort sincere. Much better. Mr. Reed, Yukiko encouraged with a warm smile. Now try the phrase for I apologize for my behavior. By mid-morning, Maxwell had memorized a dozen key phrases. Before heading to his meeting, he made a detour to the front desk, where he found the young woman he had berated on their first day. Her name tag read, Mika. Ohayo gozaimasu, Mika-san, Maxwell greeted, bowing slightly. Watashi no kodo ni tsuite moshiwake arimasen. Mika's eyes widened in surprise at his apology, however imperfectly delivered. She bowed in return. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Your Japanese is very good. It wasn't, and they both knew it, but the gesture transcended linguistic accuracy. Something shifted in that exchange. A small bridge built where before had been only distance. The meeting with the Nakamura group proceeded differently than any Maxwell had conducted before. Rather than dominating the conversation, he listened more than he spoke. When he did present Quantum Sphere's innovations, it was with a newfound humility that seemed to resonate with the Japanese executives. During a break, Keiko Nakamura approached him. Your wife is quite remarkable, Reed-san. Yes, Maxwell agreed. I'm beginning to realize just how much. She speaks of you with great respect, Keiko continued. She believes your technology could make significant contributions to our hospitality systems. Maxwell blinked in surprise. She advocated for Quantum Sphere? Keiko's eyes crinkled with amusement. Did you think she would undermine you? That is not Elena's way. She separates personal feelings from business potential, a rare skill. As the meeting concluded with tentative interest from the Nakamura group in exploring a limited technology partnership, Maxwell felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in the modest success, humility at the realization of how his wife had quietly supported him despite his behavior, and a growing awareness of how much he had taken for granted. That evening, Maxwell and Elena walked through a small neighborhood away from the tourist areas. Elena had exchanged her business attire for a simple dress, and Maxwell had abandoned his tie. They moved through narrow streets lined with small shops and local restaurants, experiencing a Tokyo few visitors saw. "How did you discover this place?" Maxwell asked as they entered a tiny restaurant with only 8 seats at a wooden counter. "Hiro recommended it," Elena explained. "His uncle is the chef." The elderly chef greeted Elena warmly in Japanese, his eyes crinkling with delight when she introduced Maxwell. No menus were offered. Instead, course after course of exquisite food appeared before them, each with a story Elena translated. Between bites of the most tender fish Maxwell had ever tasted, he asked, "How many languages do you speak?" "Exactly? Fluently?" "3. Conversationally?" "5. Elena smiled at his expression. "I was learning Mandarin when we met. Remember those audio lessons I used to listen to on my commute?" Maxwell felt a pang of recognition. "You stopped those after we married." "It became harder to prioritize," Elena acknowledged. "But I started again last year. Online classes during your late nights at the office." The chef placed 2 small cups of sake before them, explaining something to Elena that made her laugh. "What did he say?" Maxwell asked. 2 worlds, one heart-on. Their final morning at the Cerulean Sky Resort, Maxwell woke before Elena. He slipped from bed quietly, ordered breakfast, and set it up on the balcony while she slept. The past 4 days had transformed them both, or perhaps more accurately, had begun the process of transformation. When Elena emerged, her hair tousled from sleep, Maxwell was struck by how beautiful she looked in the gentle morning light. "What's all this?" she asked, surveying the elaborate breakfast spread. "A proper goodbye to Tokyo," Maxwell explained, pulling out her chair, "and a promise for our future." As they enjoyed the meal, Maxwell presented Elena with a small package wrapped in handmade Japanese paper. "What's this?" she asked, untying the delicate ribbon. Inside lay a business card holder crafted from hand-polished cherry wood. Elena opened it to find new cards bearing her name and title. Elena Reed, Strategic Acquisition Director, Cerulean International Holdings. "Keiko mentioned they were making it official," Maxwell explained. "I thought you deserved cards that reflect your achievement." Elena traced the embossed lettering. "This is unexpected." "So are you," Maxwell replied with a smile. In the best possible way. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Hiro entered with a formal envelope, which he presented to Elena with a bow. "Nakamura-san asked me to deliver this personally before your departure," he explained. Elena read the enclosed letter, her expression shifting from surprise to pleasure. "The Nakamura Group has approved a technology partnership with Quantum Sphere, specifically your AI hospitality interface." Maxwell's eyebrows rose. "That's unexpected." "Keiko writes that your respectful approach during the meeting impressed them," Elena continued, "as did your efforts to learn basic Japanese." She handed him the letter with a proud smile. "Congratulations." After Hiro departed, Maxwell shook his head in wonder. "I came to Tokyo expecting to conquer, and instead I learned to connect." "That's the paradox of real power," Elena observed. "The more willing you are to share it, the more you actually gain." Their final hours at the resort were spent in purposeful farewells. Maxwell joined Elena as she met with the staff, watching with newfound appreciation as she addressed each person by name, inquiring about families and expressing genuine interest in their lives. When they reached Mika at the front desk, Maxwell surprised both women by presenting her with a small gift, a pen from Quantum Sphere's limited collection. "For your patience and professionalism," he said, his Japanese phrase carefully rehearsed. "I have much to learn." Mika accepted the gift with a deep bow. "It was an honor to serve you both, Reed-san." As their car pulled away from the resort, Elena leaned against Maxwell's shoulder. "You've changed in just a few days." "Not changed," Maxwell corrected her. "Remembered? The man you met in Hong Kong is still here, just buried under years of ego and ambition." Elena squeezed his hand. "I look forward to getting reacquainted with him." "And I look forward to truly knowing you," Maxwell replied. not just as my wife, but as the remarkable professional you've become. No more shadows, no more separate worlds. As Tokyo's skyline receded behind them, Maxwell reflected on the unexpected journey this business trip had become. He had arrived as a demanding billionaire, certain of his place in the world. He was leaving humbled, with a marriage renewed and a perspective forever altered. That evening, their plane soared above the Pacific. Elena slept peacefully beside him while Maxwell opened his laptop to draft an email to his executive team. The subject line read, "Company Culture Overhaul, Respect Initiative." The first line began, "Effective immediately. Quantum Sphere will implement comprehensive language and cultural sensitivity training for all employees." As he typed, Maxwell glanced at Elena. In sleep, her face showed the quiet strength that had always been there. Patient and enduring while he had been blind to its value. He thought about the staff at Cerulean Sky, about Hiro's dignified professionalism in the face of disrespect, about Mika's resilience, and about Keiko Nakamura's keen assessment of character. He thought about the man he had been and the man he was becoming, a journey that had only just begun. Maxwell saved the draft and closed his laptop. He took Elena's hand gently in his, careful not to wake her. Tomorrow they would return home to their life together, but it would be a new version of that life. One where two strong individuals chose each day to build something greater than either could create alone. Two worlds, one heart, Maxwell whispered, echoing the phrase the elderly chef had used to describe them on their final visit to his restaurant. As the plane carried them across the ocean, Maxwell Reed, humbled billionaire, evolving husband, perpetual student, finally understood the true meaning of success.